This is your host, Sir Patrick Mack. We're back once again, and I got a few things I want to talk at you about. And I want to follow up on a story in regard to an explosion the other day in Baltimore. We talked about it in our last video, and we're going to follow up on it today. So you grab that coffee, fist bump your neighbor, stretch your hammies. Maybe before you fist bump the neighbor, maybe just ask politely, hey, do you have coronavirus? No offense if you do. I'm not judging if you do or if you don't. It's just a polite thing to do. It doesn't mean that you actually think the person has it. It's just that everybody's trying to be politically correct these days. So do whatever you got to do, and let's get started. First things first, if you have not seen my video from the other day on the 12th entitled 1 Iota, I suggest that you do, as we're going to be following up on a couple of the topics that we discussed in that video, unlike the MSM, which never follows up on anything. So we were talking about a couple of things, and I'm just going to kind of sum it up for you because I really would appreciate it if you went back and checked it out if you're not familiar with this story. We were talking about multiple explosions around the world. Very curious. Most of them seem to involve a lot of dark, black smoke. Now, this was not one of them that we're going to talk about here. We're talking about Baltimore, Maryland. This was supposedly a gas explosion. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. We're going to follow up, and I'm going to give you a view of it, and you can decide for yourself. But that was the story, and this ended up taking out 4 units on Labyrinth Road. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. We also went off on a couple of side searches that may or may not be related, but they led us to some interesting places and a couple of red flags. Today, I've also found a few more red flags that I would like to show you before heading off of this story. But this was labeled a gas explosion, and we'll go ahead and take it at face value for now. But in our searches, we found this mysterious looking truck with a very sketchy looking logo that I thought was worth looking into. We'll talk about that. And we also looked into a group known as the Nuaobians. This is a group that's been around for some time, and it was led by a Dwight York, who ended up being arrested and sent to prison for 197 counts of molestation. So this was a very big deal. Now, I do not know if that group was related to the explosion itself. It was just a great time to explain who the group was for those who are not familiar, but I do think there's some relevance to the emergence of some of these militant groups that we're seeing out there in Georgia. So that's what we're discussing in this video here, 1 Iota. And like I said, I want to show you a couple more red flags that I saw in this. But let's go back to the explosion. We're over here at the Baltimore Sun, and this was from the 11th. A second victim, a 20-year-old Morgan State University student, was found early Tuesday in the rubble of a gas explosion in northwest Baltimore, as BGE said the blast wasn't caused by one of its gas mains. And I'm going to show you here. This was caught on ring.com from the camera across the way. Yikes. And as you can see, not a lot of dark smoke or anything like that. It looks like mostly kind of white or gray smoke. I've seen a very similar explosion like this in my own life one time in Cairo. Let's take a look at it again. I was in Cairo. I actually saw a stove explode, and this looks like it could be a very similar kind of thing. Now, whether or not it's a stove or it's a gas explosion or whether they got some sort of meth lab cooking, it's hard to say, but I can believe that this could be a possible gas explosion, although they're saying that it wasn't from their mains. Workers continued to investigate and clean up the scene of the explosion that also killed one woman and seriously injured at least 7 other people. It ripped Monday through several row houses in the Reisterstown Station neighborhood in northwest Baltimore, displacing 30 people. And I want to stop right there because another thing that I found curious about this is that those row houses all belong to one couple. We're going to talk about them in just a second. The father of Joseph Graham, 20, a rising Morgan sophomore and City College graduate. I'm going to stop you again. I saw this in a few different publications, everybody referring to Joseph Graham as a rising Morgan sophomore. Maybe there's nothing curious about that and they're just plagiarizing each other. But I wanted to point out that numerous outlets were reporting him as a rising Morgan sophomore. The father, who was visibly distraught and surrounded by supporters outside his home, declined to comment further. Morgan State also confirmed Graham's death in a statement. And this is very sad. Looks like a handsome young man here, and his life was taken. Morgan State student, rising sophomore. Not really sure what that means, but I'm assuming they're saying that his life was on the up and up. As officials continued to assess the cause of the blast, a process that could take months, BGE said it found no leaks in an inspection Monday of the home's gas mains, and that company data indicated some type of issue beyond the BGE meter on customer-owned equipment. Investigators were analyzing the new information, BGE said. Okay, so we're saying that it didn't come from their mains and that they didn't detect any leaks. That doesn't mean that there wasn't something faulty going on with the equipment there, but whatever it was seemed to be distributed throughout the whole unit, which was all coming back to one owner. So it could very well be possible that this was some sort of user error or something on the user end that could have led to this explosion, but indeed curious. The explosion occurred shortly before 10 a.m. Monday and destroyed 3 two-story row homes in the 4200 block of Labyrinth Road, just behind Reisterstown Road Plaza Shopping Center near the city-county line. The 3 homes are all owned by Leroy and Robin Johnson of Owings Mills, who did not respond Tuesday to a request for comment. BGE said there had been no leaks reported at the properties within the past 5 years. All of the BGE gas mains and service pipes in the neighborhood were routinely inspected for leaks in June and July of 2019, with no leaks found, the company said. The Labyrinth Road gas main and the service pipes were inspected again Tuesday, BGE said in a statement, and no leaks were found. And as you can see, a lot of damage right there. And I can't help but wonder if there doesn't seem to be a pile of bricks around here, and yet you see bricks all throughout the building here, so I'm assuming that it's just kind of a brick facade. Otherwise, I would imagine you'd see bricks all over the place. So it looks like it was probably just a brick facade with maybe wood or cement behind it. But there you go. Check the mail, y'all. Check the mail, y'all. This one comes from Kurt, who says, "Hey, Sir Mac, I love your show. It's the best show in the history of ever." No, they don't say that. I live close to Baltimore, and I have the names of the owners of the homes that exploded. They actually own 4 homes along the section of that street, and we mentioned that already. 4234, 4232, 4230, and 4228. Just so you don't have to take my word for it, the site to look up is, and there you can see it right there. If you want to try and go ahead and enter that in and check it out for yourself, you're welcome to. I was able to find it the first time. Curiously enough, after that, I wasn't able to access that link anymore. Not sure if that's just specific to me, but there you go. But indeed, this is registered to Leroy O. and Robin C. Johnson. Now, I have not included their personal address because I have no desire to dox these people, and I most certainly have no desire to accuse these people. We just know that the explosion occurred on their properties. They do have a separate address where they actually live, so they were renting this out. Now, they do have this company known as Johnson Total Services, and I'm not exactly sure what they do, but we are going to have a look at the address there. Once again, I want to point out that what I'm seeing here in the area is really more what's giving me the red flags. Whether or not there are red flags about this couple, I don't want to say that. All we know is that it was their property that exploded. But you can see that the address is 2901 Druid Park Drive. Oddly enough, that's just a coincidence probably that there's a Druid Park and then they had properties on a Labyrinth Road. Totally coincidental. There it is, 2901, right in the center of your screen, Druid Park Drive, and it's an interesting building. Here it is. There are a number of businesses registered in this building, and in the back there's a series of truck shipping docks, but none of these seem to point to this Johnson Services. So whether or not they're still in business or not, these people are still around. They didn't want to comment on the explosion, and I can't seem to find their business there. Maybe I'm just not looking hard enough, but I wasn't able to located in this building. But if they do indeed exist, this is where they're registered to. Now, directly across the street, curiously enough, is the Department of Social Services. You can see Baltimore Infants and Toddlers. Now, over the years, they've had a number of problems themselves. Most of it seems to have to do with money funneling, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But I thought that was very curious that that was right across the street. And then I'd also like to turn your attention to, I guess, center right of your screen, a little bit lower center right. the Kitty Corral Daycare Center, and this is a picture of it. It is at a home. Now, I do want to point out that this has had really good reviews from what I can find. They don't seem to have had any problems. But if this Kitty Corral, spelled with a K, is indeed part of the bigger franchise, also spelled with a K, they have had some problems. One instance in particular happened in Sandusky, Ohio. I will be doing a video at some point in some of these cities in Ohio, seeing as they are such a huge hub of human trafficking, one of the biggest, as a matter of fact. So we'll talk about that at some other point, but Kitty Corral has indeed had some situations, but I don't want to go ahead and damn the whole organization for one instance that happened in actually earlier 2020, February 2020, where a child was found with bruises. So it could have just been an isolated instance, but that is the situation. Now, nearby in the bottom left, you'll see Dukeland Child Care Academy. This was another one that was curious because their website seemed to be a little defunct. It was a little difficult finding anything really good. They're located, there's a ton of schools around this whole area, and you can see the picture here. Even though in the Googly map picture, the parking lot was full, there's somebody actually leaving right there in the map picture. But you can see some of the windows are boarded up. It just looked a little bit curious to me. It's sort of in this isolated little stretch of the road right there. And then you have Dietz and Watson right across the street from the Druid Park Drive location. That is the, they make sausages, they make Dietz nuts, and a lot of celebrities have endorsed that company. But just above that, you see the St. Vincent de Paul Society. Now, the St. Vincent de Paul Society is worldwide. They've had a number of issues in Scotland, in Australia, and even in Baltimore. As a matter of fact, Edmund Stroop was one of the clergymen back in the day that had some problems. Now, he died in 2001 and had retired in the 90s, but he had made a run at the St. Vincent de Paul from 61 to 73 and had a number of sexual abuse allegations. So, although, again, this is another one of these really big groups that I think does a lot of good, but then again, you have a lot of knuckleheads within that organization. But I do think it is worth pointing out. I'm going to leave it at that and basically just let you know that I think this is a very suspect looking area. But some of you locals, if you have more to share, go ahead and send it my way and we'll talk about it.
Got a flashback aside, yeah, take you back, yeah.
Taking you back to August of 2018, so a couple years ago. This is from the Baltimore Brew. Chicago friend of ex-DSS director netted $1.3 million in hidden fees. Last Friday, the Brew identified Molly Mcgrath Tierney and the Family League of Baltimore as the unnamed subjects of a state audit report that disclosed serious financial irregularities at the Baltimore Department of Social Services, or DSS. Among its findings, the Office of Legislative Audits reported that an out-of-state vendor had received $1.3 million under an agreement struck by Tierney, then DSS director, with the Family League. Payments to the vendor went undetected for 8 years, according to the audit and two sources with knowledge of the arrangement. The vendor would fly to Baltimore about once a month, confer with Tierney, and occasionally produce some minor administrative work, such as updating DSS's email and phone listings. For this work, the vendor received as much as $195,000 a year, money intended for foster care and adult addiction programs, according to the audit. And I'm just going to stop there real quick and point out that this is something that we see all over the world, not just here in Baltimore. And of course, we see connections to Chicago here too, and they've had their own problems with this kind of thing. This is why it's so important to look into the programs that taxpayer funding is going to. This person was literally just doing a little bit of administrative work and making a ton of coin. After Tierney resigned last August, DSS terminated the contract, saying the services could be obtained using existing DSS employees, the audit said. So, who was the recipient of this hidden largesse that is now under review by state prosecutor Emmett David? The audit does not name the individual, but a preponderance of evidence, including an online resume since altered, points to Mona R. Patel, a longtime friend of Tierney's. The two had worked together at the Chicago Department of Human Services in the early 2000s, when Tierney, a Chicago native, was CDHS Deputy Commissioner, and Patel was a senior data analyst. According to an online document, they jointly administered a federal grant program called the Service Connector that offered case management services to public housing residents in 2003 and 2004. Tierney, then known as Molly Mcgrath, ran the program while Patel collected data and conducted a monthly analysis of outcomes. In Chicago and before that in Washington, D.C., Tierney built a reputation as a child welfare reformer. They're always reformers, aren't they? With credentials burnished by her close association with the Baltimore-based Annie E. Casey Foundation. In February 2008, Tierney was recruited to DSS as Chief Operating Officer following a scandal involving a toddler who had died from ingesting methadone. Yikes. In September 2008, she was named director of the sprawling bureaucracy that administers federal food stamps, public assistance, foster care, adoption services, and child protection programs. Okay, that's a big deal right there, ladies and gentlemen. So these people that obviously couldn't be trusted with this money were also in charge of food stamps, public assistance, foster care, adoption services, from which a lot of human trafficking comes from, and child protection programs. We can say the same about that, right? In announcing her appointment, Mayor Sheila Dixon heaped praise on Tierney as a crusader for underprivileged and sometimes hungry kids. She's no nonsense. She's got a strong background in child advocacy. Okay, fantastic. Now, there's just a couple more things I want to point out here. Same year that Tierney took over Baltimore DSS, Patel quit her job at Chicago's budget office and became an independent consultant. Yeah, I bet there was a lot of better money in that job, right? For DSS, according to Patel's LinkedIn profile, which has since been altered. Very few people knew of Patel's existence, a former DSS employee said, and those who did simply knew her as Molly's Chicago friend. Okay, so she was coming in and making all kinds of coin. And she wasn't getting it directly from the agency. She founded a group known as the Monsky Consulting Corp, and that's essentially how they kind of found her out. So let me skip you down a little bit further here. In 2013, Patel's salary was raised to $175,000 a year, with $20,000 in travel allowances by the Family League's new CEO, Jonathan Rondeau. Now I want to take you to a different article that was written about a month later in September from the Baltimore Sun. State prosecutors are investigating former Baltimore Social Services Chief Molly Mcgrath Tierney after auditors questioned nearly $2 million she directed to a contractor and local nonprofit. We just talked about that. Sources with knowledge of the investigation say prosecutors are also reviewing whether Tierney followed proper procedures in placing 2 foster babies with the CEO of the nonprofit in 2016. Tierney built a national reputation as a passionate advocate for disadvantaged children during her 9 years directing the Baltimore Department of Social Services. She resigned in August of 2017 without public explanation. So overall, they were looking at about $7 million of missing money through this audit. In one instance, she awarded $500,000 to the nonprofit to renovate a shuttered Park Heights school, even though the project had been suspended, the auditors wrote. That money has been returned. In another instance, she received $22,100 worth of computer tablets bought by a contractor with state money, according to the Office of Legislative Audit's report. Tierney gave some of the engraved tablets as gifts for personal use. Engraved tablets. Okay, fantastic. But here's the big deal. The financial audit made no mention of the 2 foster babies Tierney placed with the former CEO of the Family League. But sources with knowledge of the investigation say prosecutors are reviewing the placements. Both children were placed with Jonathan Rondeau, former CEO of the Family League, and his husband, Matthew Rondeau, though one child was ultimately adopted by another couple. Jonathan Rondeau resigned from the Family League 1 month before Tierney stepped down from social services. He now works in Annapolis as CEO of the ARC Central Chesapeake region, a nonprofit that serves people with intellectual disabilities. Rondeau and his husband declined to comment for this article. Okay, so we have Rondeau, then Tierney, and then Patel all stepping down. Now I want to skip you down to the bottom of this article and talk about these adoptions. In the adoptions matter, complaints were made to the Baltimore Inspector General almost 2 years ago after 2 newborns were placed with the Rondeaus in August and October 2016. The Baltimore Sun obtained the confidential complaints, which allege that Tierney gave preference to a friend in placing the foster babies. When asked about the complaints, Jonathan Rondeau discussed the cases with the Sun in December 2016. He and his husband spent months undergoing the routine approval process to become adoptive parents, Rondeau said. They waited for more than a year for their chance to adopt. In both cases, he said, Tierney called him after the babies were born. I feel like there's an unfair perception of my position and Molly's position that we knew each other and worked together, Rondeau said in 2016. I don't think that I got any special treatment in the placement of the children, but Foster cases are cloaked in confidentiality. The system protects the identities of children and parents. The birth mother of the second child could not be reached. The boy remains with the Rondeaus, but the family of the other child, his birth parents, adoptive parents, and their attorney discuss his case with the Sun. During an interview last year, Stacy Martinez, his birth mother, said she struggled with drug addiction. Recent attempts to reach her were not successful. When she gave birth, her son showed traces of the drugs, Martinez said. Upset with nurses and doctors, she left Johns Hopkins Hospital the next day, records show. The baby's aunt, Sarah Sweeney of Virginia, said she was calling the hospital to take custody of the child. But Jonathan Rondeau said he had received a phone call from Tierney about the baby left at the hospital. Social Services records 2 days after the birth named the Rondeaus as the proposed adoptive parents. So it goes on to say that this was a wrongly declared abandoned baby under Maryland's Safe Haven Act. The law protects mothers who give up a newborn from penalty. It was intended to prevent grim but rare cases in which a mother abandons a baby on the roadside. But the act can be misapplied, Schweitzer said, with officials whisking away babies into hand-picked adoptive homes. Okay, so this was a big deal a few years ago, but there's one more thing that I want to show you, which is right down here at the bottom of the article. Tierney drew criticism in 2013 after a Sun investigation found she was sending youths to a private academy in Philadelphia, where they earned a high school diploma after a 3-hour exam. Colleges rejected the diplomas. An accrediting body concluded that the academy was a diploma mill. So both Tierney and Rondeau had leadership positions at the Family League of Baltimore, another one of these nebulous groups that we can't exactly figure out what they do. We invest funding into community-based organizations to help children and families in Baltimore reach their full potential. I have no idea what that means. Sounds like an easy way of saying we take money and then we give grants to other groups that take money, that give money back to our groups so that we can give grants so that we can take money to give money. Well, we just saw how Tierney handles the money and children, and it looks like Rondeau stepped down too. Whether or not there was something nefarious to that, who knows, but he did it right before it all went down. And then, of course, we had Patel, who was making some sweet coin just so she could show up once a month and change the email font to Helvetica. Well, the Family League is partly sponsored by the OSI Baltimore. The OSI, you say? Yes, the OSI, the Open Society Institute. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. George Mother Shut Your Mouth Soros. Back in 2005, $10 million challenge grant to help OSI advance mission of helping Baltimore's vulnerable neighborhoods. But ladies and gentlemen, this is the kicker. George Soros didn't just give Baltimore $10 million. He offered up $10 million if the community could raise $20 million to continue his society's work on drug addiction treatment. So essentially, he offered up $10 million to anybody that would give him 20. That's right, boys and girls, and sadly, that's how many of these foundations operate. And even more sad is not only are they taking our taxpayer money, they're using it more often than not for nefarious purposes. And likely the people that suffer the most are our children. Sometimes our children aren't safe in child protective services. Sometimes they're not safe with their social services. I think you understand how this all works. They are essentially taking our money to traffic our children. Well, one of these foundations was perfectly happy to pony up a little bit of coin for this, and we just mentioned him, the Annie E. Casey Foundation, founded, oddly enough, by James Casey, who is the original founder of the American Messenger Company, now known as the United Parcel Service, and they're in the news a lot lately right now, right? Well, Casey was another one of these philanthropists, not only with this foundation, but the Casey Family Programs based out of Seattle, another one of those knucklehead neighborhoods, and he's all about the foster homes. And once again, that's one of the places where we see the biggest problems in human trafficking. I also want to point out that although Casey had historically stated that he was nonpartisan, he was pretty clearly left. He gave to a lot of leftist foundations, the American Enterprise Institute, the Hudson Institute, the Child Welfare League of America, Children's Defense Fund, which already puts up another red flag. You may have heard me discuss that a bit in my Weatherman series, the Children's Defense Fund, the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities, and HandsNet. But another real big one was ACORN, as well as the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities. So these were hardcore leftist ideologies that he was contributing to, and a lot of this, again, was coming from taxpayer money, and much of it was under the guise of protecting our children, and we've seen exactly how well they've protected our children. And at the end of the day, what this really does for the people who are supposed to be the beneficiaries of these programs is to keep them down in this perpetual system that we keep funding. One more thing that I will add about our boy Casey, and this is according to Constance Horner, who sat on the board of trustees for the Casey Foundation, was that there were certain organizations that Casey absolutely would not give to, and those were organizations that supported marriage and fathers being in the homes. So that tells you a lot about the kind of people that we're dealing with here. This, ladies and gentlemen, is one of our biggest quote-unquote philanthropic foundations funded by Soros, taking care of our children and handling our packages. So now, whether or not any of that has anything to do with our explosion or our couple that own the apartments nearby, I do not know. But it was some fun stuff that I dug up for you, and I thought you might enjoy. This next story is from the Gateway Pundit. Democrat Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz accused of assaulting primary opponent's 16-year-old volunteer during early voting. Democrat Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz of Florida was accused of assaulting a minor during early voting this weekend. Wasserman Schultz's primary opponent, Jen Perelman, tweeted, "Debbie physically shoved one of my volunteers handing out palm cards and then verbally accosted her for calling out her record on the environment. This will not be tolerated." I'm only going to say this once. If you want to put your hands on anyone, try it with me. Don't you ever touch my volunteer, Attorney Perelman tweeted, putting Wasserman Schultz on notice. Girl fight! Girl fight! And there it is right there. If you want to put your hands on anyone, try it with me. Look at that. Couple of brawlers right there. How you going to push a 16-year-old kid? The alleged victim, 16-year-old Martina Velasquez, described the assault in a Chinese TikTok video. When I was handing out palm cards to voters and explaining how Debbie was not endorsed by any climate activists other than the Sierra Club, she ended up shoving me more than once, calling me a liar to my face. Let's check it out, homegirl.
What's up, TikTok? I really need your help to blow this up. Pretty much, my name is Martina Velasquez. I'm from Broward County, Florida, and I've been a political advocate since I was a child. Right now, I'm campaigning for Jen Perelman in District 23. Jen Perelman is up against a monster, and her name is Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And I want to tell y'all about my experience with Debbie yesterday. I'm not only a child at the age of 16, but I'm also a constituent and an activist, and a very specific a climate activist. When I was handing out palm cards to voters and explaining how Debbie was not endorsed by any climate activists other than the Sierra Club, which is historically racist, she ended up shoving me more than once and calling me a liar to my face. This is my congresswoman, and that's exactly why we gotta get her out. I have 2 days until election day. Now I'm begging you, please spread this and vote Jen. We need change.
Oh, it is so on right now, girl. First of all, kudos to Martina Velasquez, who did the right thing at 16 years old, got on TikTok. And even though I'm not a big fan of TikTok, she probably just reached thousands of new people who are now going to vote against Debbie Wasserman Schultz simply by the virtue of the fact that she pushed a 16-year-old girl. And of course, there's Representative Perelman, who stepped in like a boss. She's like, what? You want to go? You want to catch these hands? What's up? Maybe Wasserman Schultz can get a little chancla up in here, a little chancleta. That's what she needs in her life. After all, she's not exactly the best judge of character, is she? Her and the Packy posse smashing all those hard drives and servers and trying to make out of the country with millions of our dollars. No big whoop. So well played to you, Martina, as well as you, Miss Perelman. Way to step in like a boss. You want to catch these hands? You want to go? What's up? Finally, from Fox, Senator Martha McSally of Arizona introduced a resolution Thursday calling on China to repay U.S. bondholders more than $1.6 trillion of sovereign debt, including interest that predates the country's communist government. The measure is co-sponsored by Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee and a House measure led by Mark green is forthcoming. Resolutions lack the force of law held by a bill, though they reflect the will of lawmakers. China has repeatedly failed to honor its obligations to America, taking America's families' money and jobs, McSally said. Well, the abuse ends here. We are holding China accountable for their debt and for unleashing the coronavirus, which we just call the Rona around here. All right, maybe if you're Martina, you might just call it the Cub, right? That's what they're calling it. No big whoop. Either way, I don't have it. No offense if you do, though. You know, it's okay. It's okay. We demand China pay back the $1.6 trillion it owes to American families. The bonds, which are backed by gold, were issued by the Republic of China as long ago as 1912. The government's leaders fled to Taiwan following the end of Chairman Mao Zedong's revolution in 1949. Beijing maintains Taiwan is part of China, and under international law, successor governments are responsible for the debts of their predecessors. Okay, so we're starting to see some of this play out. It looks like a little bit of war posture. Now, I'm not so sure this is going to go that far, and I most certainly don't think we're getting $1.6 trillion. But we've seen this before. Other countries have done this to China. As a matter of fact, it says right here, British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher in 1987 ordered Beijing to pay Brits for their holdings or lose access to British capital markets, enticing then Chinese President Li Xianyan's government to reach a settlement of 23.5 million British pounds. Okay, so this looks like another Trump move, actually, even though this is coming from Martha McSally, but this is a very Trump-esque move in which you ask for a bunch and you're probably not going to get that back, but it's a great way to start the ball rolling, getting China to play. China is definitely having their feet held to the fire by numerous countries. And it looks like Taiwan is starting to posture too. I think they're questioning whether or not they want to try and go to war with China. We'll have to see how it plays out. I don't think anybody really obviously wants to go to war, but I think everybody is definitely considering the possibilities. Do I think we're going to get $1.6 trillion? No way. But does it mean that China will be forced to play ball? Yes, indeed. And of course, if those bonds are backed by gold, that's going to put a real rush on China because it's really going to put a test to how much gold they really have. And that's a much deeper story and a much deeper question, I think, for another day. But what I think it really says for now is that there's some people there that are willing in our own government to hold China responsible other than just President Trump. And that's starting to say a lot. And that's a lot better off than we were before. And right now, that's all I got for you for now. As always, if you like this video, please click like, share, and subscribe. All my links are down below if you're watching me on YouTube, including the link to the song that you like so much in the jazzy little intro. It's always been down there. So is my email. If you've got information for me, please email me. Please do not DM me on Twitter. I do not respond. Other than that, you can find me at Twitter and Parler and Gab at IPOT1776. It's all linked down below on YouTube, and it's pinned to my Twitter, or you can find me at IPOT1776. That's all I got for you today. This is Sir Patrick Mack, and until next time, stay funky.